Thank you for joining us on this journey of Jewish ethics and beliefs. The topic is vast. Clearly, what is Jewish ethics and beliefs? You know, the code, the ethical code of what we have today in society. In Western society, probably more so than anything else, is really based on the Torah. Really based on the Torah. We've discussed this before. The Hammurabi Code is not really good ethics. You know, I'm sure there's some, but there's a lot that's really off and doesn't strike anybody as even moral. But the Torah is morality. The Bible is morality, and that's where we get our ethics from, for the most part, in Western society. You know, Judeo-Christian and Muslim, it all comes from the same source. Yesterday we had a conversation. You know, it's funny I call it a conversation. I'm talking to the wall, but yesterday. By the way, if you comment and add, it will be a conversation. But yesterday we had a conversation about dying for God, Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. And we discussed a few things. So just as a review, because it was a little tricky, just as a review, for the most part, aside from three mitzvahs, three things, we have to live by the Torah. And even if in order to live, we have to violate a commandment, then we need to violate the commandment. And we gave the talk yesterday about kosher, that if you need to eat this non-kosher thing, but it will save your life, even at the slightest chance, it will save your life. You got to do it. There's no way around it. In fact, for the eating disorder world, I get many phone calls as a rabbi to guide them, specifically anorexia nervosa. And the questions that usually come, aside from where do I go, where do I send, who do I speak to, how do I deal with this, this will never end, I get all that. Aside from that, the question that they ask me is usually my daughter is just recovering from anorexia, and she's out of hospital. The question they have is that Yom Kippur is coming. Does my daughter have to fast? So I answer the question as follows, is that if your daughter fasts, your recovering daughter who had anorexia, recovering child who had anorexia fasts, it is actually a sin. It's wrong. And they have to be removed a couple of years from hospitalization or from treatment, even PHP. They have to be removed 2 years before we can even discuss whether they should fast. Now, of course, the other fasts, of course not, but Yom Kippur is the biblical one. And so they do not fast. And when there's somebody who is ill that needs to eat on Yom Kippur, just to give you the idea here. So you tell them, okay, you can eat on Yom Kippur, but you eat in small bits. So if somebody has to eat because they have diabetes, or so you tell them eat in small quantities. The problem is small quantities for anorexia is dangerous because it will trigger them and could possibly bring them back to hell. So anorexia, there's no such thing as measurement. You can't measure. And this all comes under the banner. It all comes under the banner of living by the Torah and not dying by the Torah. So I hope that's clear. And by the way, that would be true of anybody that believe me, you want to get him straight, let him eat a normal portion and watch him, etc. So that was one part of living by the Torah, except there's three things that we have to give up our life. And the one we discussed at great length was if you're asked to give up your faith, just totally give up your faith, then you if you're asked to deny God or even hide who you are, you're not allowed to do that. You're just not. And it's the highest form of connection with God. Your soul can go no higher. There are 5 levels of the soul. The loftiest level is called oneness. And if somebody is asked to give up their life, and they say yes, even by the way, it doesn't happen, and they say, yes, I would give up my life to do this because I don't want to give up my faith. I don't want to turn my back on God. You've tapped into Yechidah. You've tapped into oneness. You've tapped into the most amazing level that you can. So that's basically dying for God. So dying for God is, no, we don't die for God, except in a couple of circumstances, which leads me to the other thing about God and dying for God. So that's physically dying. One does not have to give up their children for God. If a person is extremely faith conscious and their children become irreligious, agnostic, atheistic, intermarry, and it really hurts the parents and it bothers them to the core, to then deny your child your parenting, to deny, to basically give up on your child, to say that your child is, you're no longer my child, like they used to do. Right? We sit Shiva. It is abhorrent. Right? Your responsibility, biblically, is to be a parent. Their responsibility, biblically, is to do X, Y, and Z. So they choose not to, for whatever reason. It's not a blame game. It's whatever reason. They choose not to. You still have the biblical obligation of being a parent. And I don't care how old your child is. It doesn't matter. If you are that parent, you're biblically obligated to embrace your children. Your children can disappoint you. Your children can turn on their religion. Your children can hold up signs anti-bris, anti-circumcision, anti-God. They could convert and become the Pope. It doesn't matter. You are biblically responsible to be their parent. You're not becoming the Pope. You're not holding up the signs anti-circumcision. You're not the one who's denying God. So why do you have to give up your biblical obligation to be a parent because they gave up theirs? That is the rationale. That is the philosophy. So I'm not minimizing pain. It's very painful. Very painful. But they're still your kids. And do not let God come in the way. Do not let religion come in the way of you and your kids. Now, there is a whole other side of sanctification of God's name. And it's not about dying for God per se, but what it is that sanctification of God's name is that we have to realize that as whether you're Jewish or not, just whatever you are, you don't live in a vacuum. You do not. And let's say you're Jewish, it could be others also. Let's say you're Jewish, you represent God. And when you walk in the street and somebody says, there goes a godly person, then you have perfected God's vision of creating a world. However, if you walk in the street and you don't represent God, your actions, your conduct is unbecoming, and somebody says, look at that nasty person, what you've done is you've destroyed God's vision for the world. And so therefore you have to do everything in your power. You represent God. Now that you can represent God privately, where somebody says, oh, look what that Jewish person did. And once again, we can extrapolate others. Look what that Jewish person did. Or if you're part of a group, you can say, look what that group of Jews did. How disgraceful. Or how unbelievable. Right? How unbelievable this group is. They did such incredible things. God bless them. So it can be private or public. Interesting to note, one of the most difficult things to reverse, to repent for, to reverse, is desecration of God's name. If you do something, your conduct, whether privately or publicly, it's probably worse publicly, but even privately, you as a private citizen, you as a private person, that's what I mean by privately. Do something publicly, you do it with a group. How do you reverse that? How do you atone for that? What do you do? The damage is done. You've already been in the headlines of the New York Times that you or your group or your people or did something horrific. How do you reverse that? How do you gain forgiveness? Right? And in fact, the Talmud, in Tractate Yuma, I believe, the Talmud discusses a fascinating thing. It says that when a person desecrates God, in other words, they do something, their conduct is unbecoming, completely unbecoming, and they're a learned person, they're a scholar, basically the Talmud says, oh, woe to him and woe to his Torah. So it's even worse if you're a scholar, because you should have known better. So it's just not good. You have to do everything in your power. And by the way, that includes clean clothing. That includes not having a body odor. That includes not cutting people off on the highway like a maniac. That includes not, cursing and yelling at somebody, but rather keeping your composure, etc., etc. By the way, the yarmulke is a brilliant thing because I have my yarmulke on, I can't lose my cool on the LIE. I don't want to disgrace myself or God, who I represent. So otherwise, I'm just an individual. But because I wear a yarmulke, it's a little bit more than that. They tell a story in the Talmud about this princess, or this queen. She lost her jewelry, her necklace, and she came out with a decree. Whoever finds and returns this necklace within 30 days shall be rewarded. Whoever finds this necklace and returns it after 30 days shall be beheaded. Which is kind of an odd thing. It doesn't give you incentive, does it? Anyway, so Rabbi Shmuel, Talmud says, he found it. And he waited for 30 days. On the 31st day, he presented it to the queen. And the queen says, did you just find it? He said, no. Then you must live out of the province. You must live out of the area. He said, no, I live local. She says, so then you simply forgot. He goes, no, I knew. So she goes, what are you doing? Why are you saying this? So he said, I purposefully waited till after 30 days because I have to share with your majesty that I need to tell you that as Rabbi Shmuel, right, one of the authors of the Talmud, I have to teach you that I fear God, I don't fear you. I'm returning this article because God told me to return the article. And I want to prove to you that I'm not returning it because you made a threat. It's strictly godly. And she applauded and she said touche. She accepted it and she understood it. A gutsy thing to do. So a public desecration, right? This is where somebody who's to give you an idea. So I would say like Bernie Madoff. Madoff, everybody knows he's Jewish. Everybody knows he belonged to, he was a high-ranking member and a prestigious member of the Old Westbury congregation. Right? He was a well-known entity, a well-known Jewish person with and without Jewish circles. And he was caught. And when he was paraded around, so that was not only Bernie Madoff and his family was disgraced, it was also the Jewish people. I don't know about you, it made me queasy. Why did it have to be a Jewish person? Something that I have mixed feelings about, where it's another public desecration. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, there was this measles outbreak. And they traced this measles outbreak to Muncie. And there was this mumps outbreak. And they traced this mumps outbreak to Williamsburg and Borough Park. And what they found is there were so many of these Orthodox Jews that were not vaccinated, inoculated against measles and against mumps. And therefore the government cracked down and they took away religious exemptions. Now there's no more choice. You cannot go to school if you don't have the measles vaccine. And so to me, when this story came out, I said, this is the public desecration of God's name. It made us look bad as a people. Where I'm torn is I believe the media basically shone the light on the Jewish people. Plenty of people don't get vaccines. But here there was a chance to shine the negative flashlight on the Jewish people, and therefore I blame them as well. But you can have it time and time again. Whenever the Jewish community does something that's terrible, it creates a desecration of God's name. Whenever they do something great, it creates a complete sanctification of God's name. When the other day we had the fire department and the police department, they drove down Jericho Turnpike with a menorah parade. Every car had a menorah that was lit electrically with bulbs on their car, and they drove around. It was a Jewish parade, a Hanukkah parade. And that was a sanctification of God's name. How do I know? So I know from a couple of ways. First of all, people were honking and waving, Jews, non-Jews. They thought it was just an incredible, innovative, unique idea. And they said, wow, how cool, how great. Secondly is, when you have the police officers, the escorting cop cars, that put a menorah on their car, that was amazing. With a smile. Put one on my car also, guys. Right? Put one also. Now, so that was a great thing. Let's I'll give you another example. The Chai Center that we recently advertised in a Half Hollow Hills playbill or something. The reason why we did it is because we want to show we support the community. So that's, creating good feelings. Oh, there's this, Jewish place, and that is really part of the community. Same idea. It's all part of the same idea. However, now, what happens if a Jewish person leaves a bad taste in your mouth, does something terrible, steals from you, rips you off? What happens if a Christian person does it? Or what happens, whatever, somebody does it. But we're talking about Jewish. Let's say me, as a rabbi, I get somebody upset. They don't like my stance. They don't like my, on something. Right? And they say, oh, I don't like it. And to me, it was a shanda. It's a disgrace what you stood for, what you were, right? And I have positions. I'm not even talking about politically. I'm talking about other stuff. So, is that a desecration? Is that? So the answer is probably not. However, to anybody that gets upset, as an example, with your rabbi, it doesn't mean that God is to blame. It does not mean you should sever your connection with God just because you got upset at your rabbi. You can still come to the same place with the same rabbi and see if you can work it out or not, or move on. Unfortunately, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, it's quite obvious. And likewise, a Jewish person hurts you in business. It doesn't mean that every Jewish person is going to hurt you in business. It's wrong of them, and I would be the first to tell them that you cannot pray to God and study every day and look the way you do and be a thief, because it's incongruous. It's just anathema one to the next. And likewise and so forth, if a just because you have a priest, right, in Rockville Center, whatever, they sexually, doesn't mean every priest. It doesn't. It's you cannot, and you definitely cannot blame God. The only person that you can blame is the offender, and the person who helped, was an accomplice with the offender. But for you to say, oh, the desecration of God's name because you're a rabbi, desecration of God's name because you're a priest, desecration of God's name because you are XYZ, it's and therefore I sever my relationship with God, it's foolish, and it's wrong, and it's just not, it's not a good excuse, just not. If you have any questions at any time, you could post here, or you can send me directly to my email, rabbi@thechaycenter.com. Please feel free to share. If you wish to peruse other videos in the classes, such classes, you're welcome to go to thechaycenter.com/academy, or go to Spotify and go to Chai Center or Chai Academy, etc., etc. Please feel free to share this, and let's bring more people on board. Be well.